You ever work your whole life to crawl out of a hole only to have the same hands that pushed you and try to drag you back down? That's what this is. A story about blood, betrayal, and the house that was supposed to be my salvation, until they came knocking. Uninvited. Unrelenting. They always made it clear I wasn't wanted. Not in words, at least not often. But in the way they looked right through me when I spoke. In the way the last piece of cake was always for my brother, even if I hadn't had a bite. In the way I was punished for hitting back but he was never punished for hitting first. 3 years younger than me, but born a prince. My little brother, Dan, could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, could do no right. By the time I was 16, I'd already figured out that my parents weren't going to change. They had their golden child and they had me, the leftover. When I moved out, I was still in high school. Spent that last semester couch surfing with friends and eating whatever I could afford. They didn't come to graduation. Didn't ask how I was doing. I figured I was done with them. But blood's a strange thing. It doesn't let go easy. Over the years, I clawed my way up. Worked jobs I hated, saved what little I could. Got burned a few times, trusted people I shouldn't have. Even ended up living out of my truck for a stretch during the pandemic. $1,000 camper shell, a long extension cord, and a silent prayer that no one would break in while I slept. That was home for almost a year. No one offered to help. Not family, anyway. I asked my parents once, just to park my camper in their driveway. Dan and his wife were still living there with their growing brood. 4 kids and counting. My parents said there was no room for me. Said if I wanted to stay, I'd have to pay rent. Full rent, as if I were renting a place in the city, not a slice of concrete to park a beat-up camper. Dan and his wife laughed. Called me a bum. So I found work. Got lucky. Landed a steady job with a decent boss. He let me park behind the warehouse and even plug in my camper. Paid my dues. Took the worst shifts. Learned a few skills. Got promoted. Then came the house. 3 bedrooms, small property, manufactured but solid. 10 grand under asking. I drained my savings for the down payment and locked in the loan. Finally, after everything, I had a roof over my head that was mine. A key that opened a door only for me. No couch. No camper. Just a man, his house, and some peace. That peace didn't last. It started with a social media post. Just a photo, me standing in front of the place, grinning like a damn fool. Didn't even tag the location. Thought maybe they'd be happy for me. They weren't. A few weeks later, they showed up. My parents, Dan, his wife, the whole pack of them. I didn't even give them the address, somehow they found it. Maybe followed me from work. Maybe got it out of someone I thought was a friend. They didn't come with gifts or congratulations. They came with expectations. They walked through the house like they already owned it. Opened closets, peeked in cabinets. Dan's wife had this smug little smile on her face, like she knew something I didn't. My parents kept making comments. So much space, my mom said. More room than you need, my dad added. Dan just nodded like he was mentally rearranging the furniture. Then they asked to talk. Everyone else filed out to the porch like they'd rehearsed it. Dan pulled me aside and said, calm as you please, that he and his family needed the house. That it made more sense for them to live here. That I should move back into my camper out back. You've lived in it before, he said, like that made it okay. He never offered rent. Never asked. Just assumed. Said I didn't need all the space. Said his wife was pregnant again. Said our parents agreed it was best. I told him no. Told him loud enough that he took a step back. I'd spent my whole life being the quiet one. The easy one. The one who didn't make waves. Not anymore. He pushed. I pushed back harder. When they all barged in again to try and pressure me, I told them to get out or I'd call the cops. Dan's wife, smug little thing, actually hit me. Clawed at my face. My phone caught it all on video. That night, I posted the whole story online. Got ahead of their lies. Let the rest of the family hear the truth before Dan could twist it. Some sided with me. Most stayed quiet. A few called me selfish. Didn't matter. I wasn't going to bend. But they weren't done. Not by a long shot. I should have changed the locks the minute they walked out that door. But I didn't. Maybe part of me hoped they'd heard me loud and clear. Maybe I was just tired, emotionally, physically, soul-deep tired. You spend your life playing defense and sometimes you forget to shore up the walls after a siege. A few days later, I pulled into my driveway after work and saw it, a moving truck parked outside, Dan's minivan next to it. My first thought? Wrong address. Then I saw them. Dan, his wife, the kids. Carrying boxes. Waving at me. Waving. I didn't get out right away. Just sat there in my truck staring like my brain couldn't quite process what I was seeing. Dan's wife smirked and mouthed something through the windshield. Something about, "Mommy said it was okay." That snapped me out of it. I called the cops from the cab of my truck. She banged on the window and screamed at me to stop, said I was ruining everything. Said they needed the house. That I was selfish. That I didn't love my family. She even threatened to key my truck. I held up my phone and said it was all being recorded. That shut her up. The police showed up quick. I told them everything, showed them my license with the address, explained the whole situation. They walked up with me to the front door, and that's when I saw the lock. Drilled out. The guts of it laying on the porch like roadkill, drills still beside it like they didn't even bother hiding the evidence. They had changed my locks. Let themselves into my house. Set up shop like it was theirs. When the cops confronted Dan, he pulled out a piece of paper, a lease agreement. Said I signed it. Said I agreed to let him rent the place. The signature looked like a toddler trying to write cursive with their left hand. It wasn't mine. Not even close. The officers looked at the forged document, then at me. I laughed. Told them to test the ink if they wanted. Or just look at my ID again. That's when things got ugly. My parents showed up, called over by Dan, no doubt. They backed his story, said I had agreed, that I was just confused. Said it was, for Dan's family. The same old refrain. Do it for Dan. Like he was a charity case, not a grown man with 4 kids and a job. I told them to pack up and leave or I'd press charges. Told the cops about the lock, the fake lease, the assault from Dan's wife, all of it. Dan started to unravel. His wife screamed. The kids cried. They tried to play the sympathy card, group huddle, sad eyes, trembling lips. Like that would move me. Maybe once, years ago, it might have. Not anymore. I told them to get out. Gave them one chance. Said if they touched anything that wasn't theirs, I'd sue. If they left a mess, I'd press charges. If they set foot on the property again, I'd get a restraining order. They packed. Not because they wanted to, but because they knew they'd pushed too far. The cops weren't buying it. 4 officers now. Not one sympathetic face in the bunch. Dan tried one last thing. Threw the keys to the new lock into a storm drain and told me to fetch them. The cops made him fish them out himself. He came up filthy, furious, and defeated. My mother cried. Said I'd be disowned. I told her good, now I didn't have to buy gifts for people who hated me on Christmas. They drove off in silence. Dan's wife screaming at the kids. My father silent, white-knuckled. My brother looking back at the house like it was still his. I changed the locks the next morning. You'd think after the break-in, the fake lease, the full-on police intervention, they'd back off. You'd think a line had finally been drawn. But people like them? Entitled doesn't cover it. They don't just cross lines. They act like the lines never existed. That night after they left, I sat in my living room surrounded by half-unpacked boxes and silence. It wasn't peace. It was the kind of quiet you get after a tornado, everything still, but wrong. I didn't sleep much. Got up around 2 a.m. and started walking the property. Just a flashlight and a bat. I wasn't scared, not exactly. But I'd seen the look in Dan's eyes when he handed over those keys, like this wasn't over. And I believed him. The next few days were calm on the outside. I replaced the front door lock with a new smart deadbolt. Put up a camera at the front door. Ordered 2 more for the sides. A neighbor 2 houses down came by, said they saw the moving truck and asked if I had family visiting. I told them it was a misunderstanding. They nodded like they knew better, like they'd seen it all before. Then the calls started. Blocked numbers, mostly. Some voicemails. Voices I hadn't heard in years. Cousins. Old church folks. People I barely knew. All with the same script, can't you just do it for Dan? Family's more important than a house. You don't even have kids, what do you need all that space for? I didn't answer. Just saved the messages. Every single one. Dan tried again too, emailed me, this time. Said I was ruining his life. Said he was going to lose his job from the stress. Said I was ripping apart the family. He even offered rent, finally. Said he could pay a couple $100 a month, and I could still use the camper. That was rich. I ignored it. He sent 3 more. The last one said he was talking to a lawyer. That got my attention. So I got one too. Sat down with a real estate attorney, a hard-nosed woman named Blake who didn't smile once during the meeting. She looked over the fake lease, the police report, the video, the photos of the drilled lock. Then she looked at me and said, flatly, if they try anything else, we press charges. You've been more than patient. That was the first time I felt something close to relief. Someone on my side. Someone with teeth. But like I said, they weren't done. 1 week later, I came home to find a letter taped to my door. No stamp, no envelope. Just printer paper and duct tape. The handwriting was familiar, my mother's. She wrote that Dan and his family were homeless now, because of me. That I had turned my back on blood. That if anything happened to those children, her grandchildren, it would be on my conscience. And that a house is just a house, but family is forever. I crumpled it up and tossed it into the fire pit in the backyard. And then, for the first time since they tried to steal my life out from under me, I finally felt something like resolve. This wasn't just about a house. It never was. This was about every damn time they looked past me. Every birthday I spent alone. Every punishment I took so Dan could get away clean. Every time they told me to shut up, sit down, and just take it. Well, I wasn't taking it anymore. I burned that letter. Sat there and watched the edges curl, turn black, then gray. Smoke curled into the night air like an old spirit finally being exorcised. The truth is, something snapped in me then, or maybe it clicked. Whatever part of me still wanted their approval, still craved a nod, a kind word, even just a thank you, that part died right there by the fire pit. They wanted a war? Fine. I'd give it to them. But I'd do it my way, slow, cold, and clean. First thing I did was finish securing the house. New locks on every door, smart cameras on all angles, even motion sensors on the backyard. I took time off work, used up 3 vacation days just to cover every base. I wasn't going to be caught off guard again. Then I filed a trespass notice with the police department. Brought all the documentation, the video, the forged lease, the break-in report. The officer I talked to took one look at the pile and said, "You want us to serve them with this?" I nodded. He smiled and said, "Good. 'Bout time someone put the hammer down." Next up, I called my cousin Lisa. Now Lisa's a bulldog, grew up rough, made good, and never forgot where she came from. She also knew the whole family. I told her everything. Didn't ask her to pick sides. Just laid it out. She listened. Then said, "About damn time you stood up. I'll make some calls." By the end of the week, the family grapevine had shifted. A few of the old gossips backed off. A couple uncles quietly told me I'd done the right thing. One aunt even messaged me on Facebook, said she was sorry for how I was treated growing up. Funny how people suddenly find their spine once someone else does first. Then came the real punch. I went to the county courthouse and filed for a restraining order. Not just for Dan, but for his wife too. Cited the break-in, the forged lease, the assault, the harassment. The clerk just nodded like she'd seen worse, but not by much. "You got video of the wife hitting you?" "Yup. You're golden." I walked out of that building with a weight lifted off my shoulders. Finally, after all these years, the law, the system, was working for me, not against me. But the best part? That came 2 days later. Dan showed up at my job. Walked into the warehouse like he owned the place, straight to the front desk, asking to see me. Security caught it on camera, him red-faced, yelling, demanding I come out and face him like a man. Instead, they called the cops. Again. He was escorted off the premises before I even knew he'd been there. When I saw the footage later, I laughed harder than I have in years. Dan, Mr. Golden Child, Mr. I Deserve It All, being walked out like a drunk at closing time. Priceless. My boss called me into his office that afternoon. Said he'd heard the rumors, seen the video. Asked if I was okay. I told him the truth. All of it. He nodded, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "You're a good man. Whatever they're saying, don't let it get in your head. We've got your back." That hit me harder than anything my family ever said. Because here I was, the black sheep, the homeless kid who lived in a camper, finally getting respect not from the people who raised me, but from the people who watched me stand tall. And for once, I wasn't angry. I was proud. With the restraining order filed and served, things got quiet. Not peaceful. Just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you wonder what's brewing on the other side of the line. Dan and his wife disappeared from my property, which was a start. The calls slowed to a trickle. The gossips shut their mouths. I started sleeping again, not well, but better. I poured myself into work. Took on extra shifts. Helped train a new guy who reminded me of myself 10 years ago, hungry, quiet, desperate to prove he belonged. We got along fine. Didn't talk much. Just worked. Sometimes that's enough. Then one morning, I get an email from a lawyer. Not mine. Theirs. Polite language. Legal terms. But the gist of it was simple. Dan and his wife were threatening to sue me. For breach of verbal agreement, emotional distress, and, my personal favorite, intentional infliction of familial hardship. That last one made me laugh out loud. I forwarded it to my lawyer. Blake didn't laugh. She just said, "They're fishing. Trying to scare you. Let them file. I'll bury them." I said, "Good. Let's make it expensive." She filed a counterclaim that same week, defamation, fraud, harassment, attempted property theft. And we added a cease and desist letter for the social media attacks Dan's wife had been posting under fake names. We had the IP addresses. Blake found them. She was thorough like that. That's when I started hearing whispers. Dan had lost a promotion at work. His boss didn't like all the noise, cops, lawsuits, bad PR. His wife had tried to volunteer at the kids' school, but parents complained. Seems word got around. That wasn't my doing. I hadn't posted a thing since the first day they tried to steal my house. But truth has legs. It walks fast, especially when there's video. Still, I didn't gloat. I didn't send a text. Didn't say, "I told you so." I just went home to my house, and sat in the quiet. There's a certain kind of silence that comes after a long fight. Not victory. Not yet. But a moment to breathe. A moment to count the scars, the cracks in the armor, and realize you're still standing. One night I walked out to the camper in the backyard. Sat on the step and looked up at the house. The lights glowing warm through the windows. The lawn freshly cut. The porch clean. I'd earned this. Not given. Not inherited. Earned. Dan had 4 kids. A wife. A mess of a life. But that didn't entitle him to mine. And deep down, I think he finally realized that. Because the next time I heard from him, it wasn't through lawyers. It wasn't through shouting or broken locks. It was a letter. Handwritten. Sloppy. Short. I'm sorry. Not for what happened. Just that it got this far. I hope one day you'll understand why we tried. You have what we never could. I read it twice. Then I folded it and tucked it away. Not for forgiveness. Just for the record. I hadn't spoken to Aunt Carol in nearly 10 years. Last I heard she'd moved downstate after Uncle Ray died, took up knitting and badmouthing the local HOA. So when I saw her name on my caller ID, I almost didn't pick up. But I did. Her voice hadn't changed, sharp, no nonsense, and about as gentle as sandpaper. So, she said without preamble, I heard your brother tried to squat in your house and got his ass handed to him. I leaned back in my chair and smiled. News travels fast. It would have traveled faster if I'd been on Facebook, she said. But I avoid that place like I avoid sugar. Doctor says it'll rot your brain and your teeth. Then her tone softened. Just slightly. I'm proud of you, kid. Damn proud. Now, hearing that from Carol, that meant something. She was the only one who ever pulled my parents aside and asked, point blank, why Dan got 2 birthday cakes and I got none. The only adult in the room willing to say, that boy deserves better. We talked for a while. Nothing deep. Weather. Work. She asked if the house had good gutters. Of course she did. Then she asked the one question I wasn't ready for. You ever think about what comes next? I didn't answer right away. Just stared out the window at the dusk settling over my yard. What did come next? The fight was quiet for now. The lawsuits were still pending, but Blake said we were winning. I had my house. I had my job. I even had a little peace. But peace, I'd learned, isn't the same as purpose. Later that week, I got a knock at the door. Thought maybe it was UPS, I'd ordered some tools, but it wasn't. It was Mike, one of the security guards from my old warehouse days. Big guy, barrel chest, soft heart. He smiled like we were still on break, drinking vending machine coffee behind the loading dock. I heard about the house, he said. Didn't know the whole story, but I figured if anybody deserved it, it was you. We sat on the porch for an hour. Talked about the old days. He'd retired, picked up a part-time job at a local youth center. Said they could use someone with my hands and head, someone steady. You'd be good with those kids, he said. You've been through the fire. They can smell that. I didn't give him an answer. But I didn't say no. That night, I pulled out a photo album I hadn't looked at in years. Dusty, bent at the corners. A few pictures of me as a kid, mostly birthday parties I barely remembered. One in particular stuck out. I was maybe 10. Holding a small model truck I'd built myself. No one else in the photo. Just me. But I looked proud. That version of me? He'd fought hard to survive. This version? He was finally starting to live. And maybe, just maybe, it was time to help someone else do the same. The youth center was in a tired part of town. Peeling paint, a busted vending machine out front, and a parking lot full of potholes. But there was something about it, something steady, like a heartbeat. You could tell it wasn't run on money. It was run on will. Mike introduced me to the guy in charge, Luis, early 40s, worn leather jacket, hands that looked like he fixed bikes for fun and cars for survival. We shook hands, and he said, "You're the one with the crazy family, right?" I raised an eyebrow. He grinned. Mike talks. I started volunteering one night a week. Fixing up the workshop, they had a little back room full of broken tools and half-built projects. Kids would come in after school, a few of them trying to act tough, most just trying not to get forgotten. I didn't try to preach. Just handed them a wrench, pointed at the busted go-kart in the corner, and said, "You want it to move? Let's fix it." Most of them didn't talk much. But they watched. And then, one of them, maybe 16, eyes sharp, shoulders tense, stayed late after the others left. His name was Devin. "You really live out of a truck once?" he asked, like he wasn't sure if he believed it or admired it. "Long enough to hate rain," I said. He laughed once, quick and real. "Why'd you stay?" he asked. "Why not just leave?" That question stuck with me. Why did I stay? In town. In that job. In the shadow of a family that never gave a damn. "I don't run," I told him. He nodded like that made sense. After that night, he came every session. Meanwhile, back at home, the silence kept holding. Blake said the lawsuit was moving in my favor. Dan's side had gone quiet. Either they were licking their wounds or waiting to try something new. I didn't care much anymore. My house had become more than a house. It was proof. Proof that I wasn't who they said I was. That I'd earned something they couldn't steal, no matter how hard they tried. And the funny part? Once I stopped waiting for them to understand, once I let go of wanting their apology, it got easier to breathe. One Friday, Mike stopped by with a six-pack and some ribs. We sat in lawn chairs in the backyard, the camper still parked there like an old ghost, and watched the sun go down. "You ever think about leaving?" he asked. "All the time." "So why haven't you?" I thought for a moment. Then looked at the house. "Because I built this life with my own damn hands. Leaving would feel like giving them something they never earned." He cracked open a beer and raised it. "To stubborn men." I tapped mine against his. "To the ones who don't fold." It was a Sunday morning when I found the envelope. Taped to my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, written in thick black marker. Inside? Photos. Not of me, of my house. My truck. My mailbox. A shot of me sitting on the porch with a beer, back when Mike came by. All from a distance. Some from across the street. One taken through the fence slats in the backyard. There was no note. Just the message and the silence. I called Blake. She didn't even pause. Harassment. "I'll file it. And I'll ask the court to speed things up." Next, I pulled the footage from my cameras. Caught a glimpse of a figure around 2 a.m., hoodie, gloves, backpack. No face. But the way he walked, stiff, like someone who never worked with his hands, it screamed Dan. I sent it to the cops. They logged it. Said they'd patrol more often. But I didn't sleep much that night. See, Dan never knew when to quit. And I knew, deep down, he was gearing up for something worse. Something dumb. I was right. 3 nights later, I came home late from the youth center. Pulled into my driveway and saw a car parked across the street, engine running, headlights off. Didn't recognize the car. But I recognized the vibe. I didn't get out right away. Just watched. After a minute, a figure got out. Walked across the street like he owned the night. Hoodie up. Bag slung over his shoulder. I clicked the record button on my dashcam. Then I stepped out. He froze halfway up my driveway. Dan. I didn't say anything. Just stared. "You're really not gonna help us?" he asked. His voice was shaky. Not angry, desperate. Like a man whose world was shrinking too fast. "You broke into my house," I said. "Forged documents. Got your wife to assault me. You don't get to ask me for favors." "She's pregnant again," he mumbled. "We got nowhere to go. Parents, they can't help anymore. We're on our own." I shrugged. "Welcome to adulthood. You think you're better than me?" he snapped. I stepped closer. "No. Just not a thief." He looked around like he was calculating something. His hand twitched near his bag. "What's in the bag, Dan?" Silence. "Drop it." He didn't move. "Dan. Drop the bag." He hesitated. Then finally let it fall. I kicked it open with my boot. Bolt cutters. A crowbar. A can of spray paint. My jaw tightened. "You were gonna break in again?" I said. "Or trash the place if you couldn't." He didn't answer. Then came the flashing lights. Red and blue, slicing through the dark. One of the patrols had rolled by at the perfect moment. Maybe karma finally got off its ass. The officer stepped out, hand on his holster. I raised my hand slowly. "It's my brother," I said. "Caught him trying to break in." Dan tried to backpedal. Said it was a misunderstanding. Said he was just dropping off tools. Didn't matter. They cuffed him. Read him his rights. I watched it all from the sidewalk, arms crossed. And I felt nothing. No joy. No rage. Just a deep, tired kind of relief. Like a chapter finally closing. Dan spent the night in county lockup. Blake called me the next morning, said she'd already been contacted by his public defender. "They're going to push for a plea deal," she said. "But the restraining order's solid now. He's done." Done. That word lingered in my mind all day. I walked through the house, room by room. Everything was where it belonged. No signs of damage. No new scratches on the truck. But I still checked, just in case. I opened the bag the cops left behind after photographing it. The bolt cutters, the crowbar, the spray paint. The can was red. No label. Just a cheap off-brand. But I shook it anyway. It rattled, full, unopened. Part of me wanted to ask why. What he was going to write. What message he thought he could leave on the walls of the life I built. But most of me didn't care anymore. I dropped the can into the trash, locked the bin, and walked back inside. That evening, I sat down with my laptop and wrote a letter. Not to Dan. Not to my parents. Just to myself. A record. A line in the sand. They tried to take my peace. My space. My dignity. They failed. I stood up. I fought back. I didn't cave. This house is mine, built with sweat, pain, and long nights in a camper. And no one, not family, not blood, gets to erase that. I won't apologize for surviving. I won't apologize for choosing myself. I printed it. Taped it to the inside of the kitchen cabinet, right next to the fuse box. A reminder for every time the lights flicker. A week later, Blake called again. Charges were reduced, she said. Community service, counseling, and a fine. But the restraining order stands. He can't come near you, your house, or your job. I asked if he said anything in court. Just that he was acting out of desperation. I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. She paused before hanging up. You've got options now, she said. You can pursue civil damages. Squeeze them financially. Or you can let it go. I thought about it. Long and hard. Then I said, I've taken enough from them. I'm not wasting another second chasing what they'll never give me. She didn't argue. After that, I made some changes. I gutted the guest room. Turned it into a proper workspace, a place to tinker, build, think. The youth center kids started stopping by. Devin, especially. He helped me rebuild the go-kart we'd started there. Said he wanted to learn welding. I showed him how to handle the torch. We didn't talk much about family. He knew enough. One night, he asked if I ever thought about moving away. Sometimes, I said. But I'd rather turn this place into something that means more than pain. He nodded. The next day, we painted the camper. Bright blue, clean trim. Made it look like it belonged, not just in my yard, but in my story. A reminder of where I'd been. Not where I was going. Fall settled in slow that year. The leaves turned early, yellow first, then red like rust. The air smelled like damp soil and firewood. Every morning, I'd sit on the porch with a cup of coffee, wrapped in the old flannel jacket I'd worn through 2 winters in the camper. One morning, Devin showed up before sunrise. No warning. Just knocked and stood there with his hands in his pockets. You said we could talk if things got bad, he mumbled. I didn't ask questions. Just opened the door and made room at the table. Turns out, his dad had kicked him out. Again. 3rd time this year. Mom was out of the picture, long gone and not coming back. Just for a few nights, he said. Till I figure it out. I looked at him, not a boy, not yet a man. And I saw a reflection. Not exact, but close enough. The look in his eyes, tired, angry, like the world had asked too much too soon. I pointed to the camper. You know how to keep a space clean? He nodded. Yeah. Then it's yours. For now. He moved in that night. Kept it spotless. Came home after work. Ate what I cooked, didn't ask for much. After a week, I found him sweeping the back porch without being asked. You ever think about school? I asked. He shrugged. Didn't think I had a shot. You do now. We started small, GED classes, then trade certification. Welding, mechanics, carpentry. He had the hands for it. Steady. Careful. Hungry. It wasn't fatherhood. I wasn't trying to be anyone's dad. But I wasn't going to be like the people who looked the other way when I was 16 and sleeping on a friend's floor either. One night, I sat on the porch alone again. The camper light was off. Devin was out with some kids from class, finally starting to live like he wasn't waiting for the next boot to drop. The stars were out. Cold and sharp. I thought about Dan. Wondered what corner of the world he'd crawled into after court. Wondered if his kids would grow up knowing what kind of man he really was. Or if they'd just hear stories of the mean uncle, who kept a house for himself. I didn't care anymore. Not out of bitterness. Just clarity. Some people, they never learn. Some wounds don't scar. They fester. But me? I healed. Not quick. Not clean. But I did. I still carry the weight. Still catch myself waiting for the other shoe to drop. But these days, when it drops, I'm ready. I've got a house that stands. Locks that hold. And a name on the deed that belongs to me. Let them talk. Let them remember me however they want. I know the truth. And for once in my life, that's enough.